What happens when you follow like society's exact recipe for a perfect, well-adjusted life and the cake still turns out to be made of ashes?
Oh, that is such a vivid way to put it.
Right. Because, you get the advanced degree, you marry the respectable partner, you buy the sensible house, and your reward for all this flawless execution, checking into a luxury hotel with a bottle of stolen cat painkillers
Yeah.
and a meticulous plan to end it all.
Yeah, which is just,
Oh, and spoiler alert, the whole thing is actually incredibly funny.
it really is. I mean, it's a brilliant, deeply unsettling premise. We're essentially looking at what happens when the psychological scaffolding of a normal life just completely collapses.
Leaves you totally isolated.
Exactly, leaving someone utterly isolated in a world that still demands constant, cheerful participation from them.
And that is exactly what we're unpacking in today's Deep Dive. We are looking at excerpts from Alison Espach's novel, The Wedding People.
Such a fantastic text.
It really is. Our guide through all this psychological wreckage is a protagonist named Phoebe Stone. And she just decides one morning to abandon her entire life in St. Louis for an outrageously expensive hotel in Newport, Rhode Island.
Right. And our mission today is to dig into the profound psychological realities hidden within this narrative. Because the text uses this really sharp, dark comedy to explore things like the exhausting burden of performing normalcy.
Yeah.
And, the profoundly isolating trauma of infertility. Plus, what happens to the human brain when the genre of our life abruptly shifts without our permission?
I do want to just prepare you, the listener, for the tone in this deep dive. The core subject matter obviously involves a woman planning to take her own life. But, and I know this sounds strange, the text we are analyzing is packed with these absurd laugh-out-loud moments.
Oh, absolutely.
It perfectly captures how the darkest stretches of human existence are, like, almost always interrupted by something utterly ridiculous.
Well, let's start with how Phoebe physically arrives at this breaking point, because her entrance is incredibly revealing. She shows up at the Cornwall Inn, which is this grand 19th century Victorian mansion, and she has absolutely no luggage.
None at all.
Right. She's left behind her house, her husband, every single physical tether to her routine.
And I am just fascinated by the wardrobe choice here. Because Phoebe is an adjunct professor, right?
Yes.
And she thinks about her closet back home, which is essentially a uniform of solid-colored gray and navy blouses. It's like the armor of someone desperately trying to prove they are a functioning, reasonable adult.
A quintessential normal person uniform.
Exactly. But she refuses to wear them to the hotel. Instead, she arrives wearing an emerald silk dress she never found an occasion for, paired with the gold heels from her own wedding day.
Wow.
I mean, okay, let's unpack this. It's like wearing your Sunday best to a demolition site. It's like she's been method acting as a background extra in her own life, and she's finally just breaking character.
What's fascinating here is the psychological concept at play, which is enmeshment. Specifically how it leads to identity foreclosure.
Identity foreclosure. Okay, say more about that.
Well, Phoebe hasn't just compromised in her marriage, She has entirely foreclosed on her own personality to match her husband's. Her husband, Matt, is a philosophy professor, and the text notes he once wrote a 34-page academic article dissecting a single word in Plato.
34 pages on one word.
Yeah. And on their first date, his grandest ambition, his ultimate dream, was simply to be normal.
Which, I mean, sounds so harmless. You hear that on a date and think, great, a stable guy. But over a decade, that demand for normalcy acts like a slow poison.
It really does.
Because Phoebe has spent her entire adulthood hiding her quirks. Like in graduate school, she intentionally wore Tevas and jean shorts just to blend in, terrified that people would find out she was strange.
Right, because she experienced the massive abnormal trauma of losing her mother as a child.
Yeah, so she equated normal with safe.
And that desperation for safety requires just a crushing amount of daily performance. Maintaining that gray blouse facade takes massive cognitive energy.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. When you prune away every unique part of yourself to fit into someone else's narrow definition of an acceptable life, eventually there's just no self left to sustain. So her wardrobe change at the hotel, the emerald dress, the gold heels, is this vibrant neon rebellion against a decade of enforced invisibility.
That desperate need to shed her normal skin is exactly why her next move is so extreme. She can't heal in the environment that broke her, so she attempts to buy an entirely artificial, unblemished reality.
Right, she goes to the Cornwall Inn.
Yeah, she books the Roaring Twenties penthouse suite for $800 a night.
A suite the front desk proudly notes comes with an infinite supply of toilet paper, which is just,
So absurd.
it's one of those perfectly absurd luxury details.
But the reason she chooses a place she has never been to is honestly devastating. Her therapist gave her that classic, almost cliche prompt, visualize your happy place.
Right.
And Phoebe realized she could only imagine being happy in a bed she had never slept in a state she had never visited.
We see this frequently in trauma psychology. It is a phenomenon we can call trauma contamination. Her home in St. Louis, her marriage, even her own physical body, they've all become these irradiated zones of failure and grief.
The radiated zones, that's heavy.
Well, the text provides the heavy context for this. We're talking 5 failed rounds of IVF, a miscarriage at 10 weeks, and the surgical removal of 3 uterine polyps just to, quote, make room for an embryo that never even survived.
God.
Her body feels like an over-harvested field. There is no corner of her known world that isn't stained by loss.
And that context makes Matt's reaction to her coping mechanism so frustrating to read. Because after all this medical and emotional devastation, Matt suggests they go somewhere fun.
Just casually, let's go somewhere fun.
Right. And Phoebe's immediate instinctual response is to fire up her computer and build a meticulously detailed spreadsheet of fun excursions. Like, she plots out paddleboarding with seals, taking water journeys, touring Edith Wharton's historical estate.
And Matt responds with sheer judgment. He looks at her work and asks, just incredulously, you made a spreadsheet of fun. The narrative even points out he uses the exact same tone he used when he criticized her for previously making a spreadsheet to track their sex life.
Okay, hold on. I have a bone to pick with Matt here.
Go for it.
He is an academic who writes 34 pages on a single philosophical word, but he gets offended that his academic wife researches a vacation. I am really struggling to see why he is so cruel about this. Isn't she just utilizing the only analytical tools she has left to try and save their marriage?
I mean, you are right to defend her. It is a brilliant example of a clash between instrumental coping and emotional exhaustion. Phoebe is a researcher, When she's faced with the chaotic abyss of infertility and depression, data is her safe harbor.
Yeah, she thinks if she can just organize the variables perfectly, she can manufacture joy.
Exactly. And the tragedy is that Matt interprets her spreadsheet not as a desperate plea for connection, but as a clinical, unromantic chore.
Because to her, fun literally is a chore now. Life has beaten her down so thoroughly that happiness isn't this spontaneous emotion anymore. It's an academic assignment she has to earn.
And look at the contrast in their daily realities, too. Matt is retreating into his professional success. He just won the Arts and Letters Scholar of the Year award. He has students fawning over his intellect.
While Phoebe's career is totally stalled.
Completely. She is stuck on the adjunct lounge committee, locked in meaningless debates about whether chairs should have built-in tablets instead of coffee tables. Their connection has completely atrophied.
Oh, and the text highlights this quiet, devastating detail. They've started outsourcing their emotional communication to their cat, Harry.
Yes. They speak to each other through the cat.
Harry thinks we should go to the Ozarks.
I love that detail because it's essentially emotional money laundering. Oh, emotional money laundering. That is a phenomenal way to frame it.
Well, the feelings between them are too toxic,
Yeah.
Too loaded with resentment and grief to be handed over directly. So they have to wash the emotions through a safe, neutral third party before the other person can receive them.
But the emotional money laundering fails, the marriage fractures, and now Phoebe is at the Cornwall Inn, seeking a sterile environment to execute her exit plan. And this is where the narrative brilliance of Espach's text really shines, because it violently disrupts Phoebe's spreadsheet-style isolation with the most aggressively social event on the planet.
The Newport wedding.
Yes.
Phoebe steps out of her room, expecting the quiet dignity of an empty luxury hotel, and walks right into a swarm of what she dubs the wedding people. The hotel lobby has been entirely taken over.
It is a spectacular collision of environments.
It really is. The lobby is packed with men, all seemingly named Jim, exchanging these violent backslapping hugs. Phoebe ends up in line behind 2 bridesmaids she internally names High Bun and Neck Pillow, based entirely on their travel gear.
I love those nicknames.
And they are having this intense, hushed debate about Kylie Jenner and their cardinal rule that everyone, no matter how objectively beautiful, has one ugly thing about them.
But they are deeply frustrated because they cannot find the one ugly thing about Lila the bride. And this introduces us to Lila, who bursts into the lobby wearing a glittering bride sash, projecting total dominance over the space.
And she assumes Phoebe is a wedding guest and hands her a welcome gift bag. We have to talk about the contents of this bag because it is the ultimate distillation of absurd modern wedding culture.
Oh, it's so perfectly unhinged.
It contains a candle, hand-poured by the maid of honor, fake Oreos, something branded as everybody water, and full-size bottles of alcohol, including German chocolate wine.
Which even Lila acknowledges the absurdity of, casually mentioning that nobody actually drinks chocolate wine, but, quote, Germans love it, apparently. You have to ask yourself, why do people hyper-curate these experiences? From a psychological standpoint, modern wedding culture is an elaborate defense mechanism.
Yeah.
It is an attempt to exert absolute control over the inherently chaotic, terrifying transition of merging two lives. The bespoke candles and the branded water, they're tangible illusions of perfection.
Which creates the most incredible whiplash, because we go straight from the hilarious absurdity of a customized welcome bag into the most claustrophobic, intense scene in the entire text. And it happens in the hotel elevator.
The transition from public comedy to private tragedy there is incredibly sharp.
The bride yells to hold the elevator doors. Phoebe tries to let them close, but Lila shoves her hand into the gap. These are ancient, heavy doors. They don't bounce back.
No, they don't.
They crush the bride's hand, cutting her, and she immediately bleeds onto the pristine white hem of her pre-wedding dress.
And they're trapped in this ascending box. The elevator is the ultimate inescapable space. Lila, bleeding and stressed, starts interrogating Phoebe about which side of the family she belongs to. And Phoebe, who just that morning severed ties with her husband and realized she essentially has no family left, just drops the heavy societal mask.
She does not sugarcoat it. Here's where it gets really interesting. She just looks at the bride and says flatly, "I'm here to kill myself."
Just lays it all out there.
The text details her plan, and it is so painstakingly tidy. She plans to order room service, smoke a cigarette on the balcony, swallow her cat's stolen painkillers right at sunset, and listen to an old CD from her honeymoon called Sax for Lovers on a Discman.
The tidiness is not just a quirky character detail, though. It is a profound symptom of her psychological state. She remembers an acquaintance who had to scrub her husband's blood out of the bathroom grout after his suicide attempt. Phoebe finds that unforgivably selfish. Even in her final act, she is governed by the internalized pressure placed on women to never be a nuisance. She wants to exit the world without leaving a stain for the hospitality staff to clean up.
But the bride's reaction is what makes this entire sequence unforgettable. Lila looks at her bleeding hand, looks at this deeply depressed stranger, and says, "You definitely cannot kill yourself. This is my wedding week." Not a day, a 6-day wedding week.
It is a masterpiece of clashing solipsisms.
That raises a fascinating question for you, our listener, to consider. Who is actually being more selfish in this tiny elevator? Is it Lila, the bride, who sincerely believes a stranger's tragic death is just an inconvenient personal attack on her wedding itinerary? Or is it Phoebe, who thinks it's perfectly acceptable to check into a luxury hotel and traumatize the hospitality staff, who will eventually find her just so she can spare her ex-husband the inconvenience?
You are hitting on the exact moral tension the author wants us to feel. Neither of them can see past the borders of their own narrative. You have a bride at the absolute genesis of her adult story, fiercely, almost aggressively protecting her curated week of perfection. And she is trapped with a woman who is at the exhausted, bitter end of her story. To Lila, the entire world exists solely to facilitate her milestone. To Phoebe, the entire world has shrunk to a quiet, unobtrusive backdrop for her exit.
Lila actually yells, "I've been planning this my entire life." And in that moment, Phoebe realizes something terrifying. She realizes she has been planning her exit her entire life, too. Her sadness, her self-destruct button was always sitting there in the background, waiting for the right level of devastation to be pushed.
Which brings us to the conceptual core of the deep dive. The reason Phoebe's worldview has completely collapsed is rooted in what psychologists call narrative identity theory.
Narrative identity theory.
Right. We do not just live our lives. We construct our identities as stories, organizing our experiences into recognized genres to make sense of the chaos.
And Phoebe's academic specialty makes this violently literal, because she teaches a university seminar on fairy tales, and she has been struggling for a decade to finish a book about Jane Eyre. Sitting in her office looking at these texts, she unlocked the mechanical truth of the fairy tale genre, which is the mother must die.
Think of Cinderella, Rapunzel, Snow White. The dead mother is not just sad background dressing, it is a structural requirement.
Exactly. Wait, I mean, the mechanics go even deeper than that. You have to kill the mother to plunge the heroine into a state of total vulnerability and desperation.
Yes.
It is the necessary catalyst that forces the heroine to eventually claw her way toward the prince and the happy ending. And Phoebe viewed her entire actual life through this exact literary lens. Her own mother died when she was a child.
Because she operates within that fairy tale framework, she subconsciously believed that her mother's tragic death was simply the required precondition for her own eventual happy ending.
Like a transaction.
Exactly, it was a transaction. She thought she had paid the toll for a good life in advance, so she played the role of the good girl. She earned the PhD, she married the professor, she bought the house.
And when she finally got pregnant with their very last IVF embryo, she thought the narrative arc was finally completing itself. The baby was the happy ending that would retroactively make the tragedy of her mother's death meaningful.
But then the miscarriage happens, and that is when she realizes the architectural blueprint she has been using to build her entire life is completely wrong.
So what does this all mean? It's like realizing you've been using the instructions for a house to try and build a submarine. Like, once you hit the water, you are going to drown. She tells Matt, the Russians got it right. She realizes her life is not a fairy tale, it is a Russian novel.
And the paradigm shift from fairy tale to Russian novel is catastrophic for her. In a Russian novel, the characters go on sweeping, exhausting adventures, they endure immense suffering, and then they just die.
Yeah, no magical reward.
Right, there is no magical reward for their pain. The beauty of the story lies entirely in the prose, in how the suffering is documented, not in a neat, satisfying resolution.
And that realization shatters her. If her pain is just a required stepping stone to a happy ending, she can endure anything. She can endure the endless needles of IVF, the humiliating adjunct lounge, the fading marriage. But if the pain is just senseless, if the baby is never coming and her career is permanently stalled and the tragedy is just tragedy, that breaks her.
We all engage in this kind of narrative framing, We force our messy, unpredictable, terrifying lives into recognizable literary genres because it gives us an illusion of control. We want to believe our suffering is building toward a third act triumph. When the genre breaks, psychological collapse almost always follows.
It is like thinking you are running a marathon with a clear finish line and a medal waiting for you, only to realize you have actually just been dropped in the middle of a dark, untracked wilderness without a compass.
That's a great analogy.
You don't want to keep running, you just want to lie down in the snow. Phoebe is completely exhausted by the labor of having to pivot. She doesn't want to improvise a new script for a tragedy. She just wants to walk off the stage.
But she can't easily walk off the stage because the bride is standing in her way. Lila's intrusion, this bleeding, demanding, wildly inconvenient bride, forces Phoebe to remain in the scene. The bride demands participation.
Which brings this incredibly rich psychological tapestry right back to you, the listener. We all have moments where we attempt to enforce a rigid normalcy on our lives. Maybe it's putting on your metaphorical gray blouse when you're dying to wear the emerald silk.
Oh, definitely.
Or maybe, when life hits you with an unimaginable loss, your instinct is to aggressively spreadsheet your way back into happiness, researching joy as if it's data to be conquered.
We desperately crave the certainty of those structures. We want the spreadsheet to guarantee the fun. We want the uniform to guarantee our professionalism. We want the fairy tale to guarantee that our suffering will eventually be rewarded.
But Alison Espach's text reveals the beautiful, frustrating truth, which is that life utterly refuses to be perfectly organized. Just when you think you have cleanly planned your own quiet, unobtrusive exit from the narrative, a bride crushes her hand in your elevator and aggressively hands you a bottle of German chocolate wine.
Those messy interruptions are the antithesis of the neat fairy tale, but they are also the antidote to the despair of the Russian novel. Lila represents the chaotic, demanding nature of life itself, refusing to let Phoebe cleanly fade into the background.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over today as you go about your week. We expend so much cognitive energy trying to curate our lives, desperately trying to be the main character in a flawless fairy tale. We are terrified of the messy, unpredictable, deeply inconvenient nature of reality.
Yeah.
But what if the chaotic interruptions to our meticulously planned lives, the annoying wedding guests in the lobby, the absurd gift bags, the terribly inconvenient strangers bleeding in our elevators, are actually the very things that keep us tethered to the world? What if those unscripted, chaotic collisions are exactly what make the story worth reading in the first place? Something to think about the next time you feel like the genre of your life just changed without your permission. Until next time.